Hello everyone, I'm going to switch gears from New World to Battlefield 2042 as I have a lot that I wish to discuss or mention. Okay, some quick notes here regarding about what you're going to hear. The first being that I'm aware it's a beta and that things are likely to change. I am also aware that EA tweeted out that the beta was an older build than the one that they're working on now. And not related to this a little bit, I do want to bring up a recap for my prior recordings in the event nobody listened to those recordings. I've always done my best to explain and say that video games have the potential to be educational. It doesn't have to be realistic to accomplish that goal. You can, however, get pretty close to realistic while still being fun and educational, is kind of what I've been saying for numerous recordings now. So you are going to hear that and a couple of other things as I go forward. So let me talk about Battlefield more directly now. Before I decided to do recording, I wanted to make sure that no changes were going to be made, and it looks like they have. So I'm really glad that I waited for the changes to occur before saying anything, because one of the bigger changes that appears to be happening is that they're ditching the specialist system. If that is correct, then I wholeheartedly agree with ditching the specialist system. I think that it was a flawed idea because of the fact that it was really confusing to play the game when everybody was the exact same character. There was no uniforms, unique coloring, or anything to help me identify that the person was an enemy. It got so confusing so very quick. I think what they should have done from the start, if they really wanted to keep the specialist system, was instead do it as like either a reward for leveling the class. So let's just say, for example, if you level recon to 10, you became a specialist of recon. From there, you would get the opportunity to pick one or two traits, to better enhance your gameplay or play style. An example on that would be maybe better marksman rifle accuracy or better recoil control when dealing with marksman rifles. I think those would have been all perfectly fine for specialists based on leveling, but based on an actual character thing, no, I think that should have never existed. But anyways, moving on. I don't know what to think about Hazard Zone yet, so I'm just going to go ahead and talk about the YouTube videos I've been listening. So I've been listening to mostly level cap gaming when it comes to thoughts on Battlefield beta as well as the announced features. I think that they have done an excellent job of talking about it and explaining the situation. So I would say out of all of the YouTube videos I could link you, I would definitely link you the ones from Level Cap Gaming. Another good one too, well, I would say good in the sense that it points out some things, is going to be the Archcast. Because Archcast has done a couple of recordings or videos now on Battlefield and the issues that it's presented. So I just want to point out that that's where my focus has been in terms of listening to all the news on Battlefield is really level cap gaming. But I do occasionally tune into Archcast and maybe one other from time to time, but it's extremely rare. Okay, so with that out of the way, let me go ahead and talk about the educational thing I mentioned earlier in the recording. So, as I mentioned earlier and in past recordings, games have the ability to be educational while not having to be 100% realistic. And I want to provide an example based on Battlefield, because one thing that's kind of bothered me with Battlefield, and I'm surprised this hasn't been mentioned, but it's possible that I'm the only one that really cares about this, is that the only marksman rifle that I saw in the beta really felt like to me it was just a assault rifle on single fire rather than full auto, which is, if that's the case, then that's not really a marksman rifle. A real marksman rifle is going to be something like the M110, M39, things like that. Here, I'll even tab over so you can see it, because I have it pulled up. Oops, wrong one. There we go. Okay, there's your M39. So, what makes, you know what, actually, screw it. I'll just go into a whole discussion about, weapons and what they're used for in today's militaries. At least the general overview, because it's obviously impossible for me to go over specific tactics, and things like that, but I can at least give you an overview, at least when it comes to infantry weapons. Well, actually, I guess I should do vehicles too, because it's just... anyways, whatever. Okay, so on the infantry side, a marksman rifle is commonly used by what is called the designated marksman in the military, meaning that it's a person specifically trained to make repeated shots at an enemy at ranges greater than your average rifleman squad, but less than a dedicated sniper. Generally speaking, that's going to be accepted at 200 to 800 yards is generally going to be the accepted range for that. Of course, again, it depends on which military you're talking about. So, they might have a different definition of that. Another thing, too, that makes designated marksmen stand out is the weapons they're using. Unlike dedicated snipers like the MRAD or one of the other many examples like the M82, which is your 50 cal, those are like actual dedicated snipers because they have the ability to hit a target at very extreme distances and make sure that it's a kill because of just how much energy is left over by the bullet when it reaches its target, because obviously bullets lose energy over time. But anyways, so that's kind of like a sniper, and in comparison, what makes that designated marksman unique is because they're generally speaking going to be smaller calibers or smaller bullets, whatever word you wish to use, in comparison, and they're also much better at doing it very quickly because a lot of times your dedicated snipers are bolt action, plus or minus a few exceptions like the M82. But other than that, yes, designated marksmen have the advantage in not just being semi-auto, but also having a high-capacity magazine. So that's kind of a designated marksman rifle and the person using it in as short of an explanation as I could give you. As far as the other weapons and roles are concerned, LMGs really are just used for suppressive fire these days, or just putting a whole bunch of bullets downrange in the attempt to kill a target. It could be either one. Depends on, again, the military in question. But either way, they're not intended to be accurate weapons. They're just intended to be a problem for the enemy because with the volume of bullets being thrown down range, it's going to be annoying or too risky to deal with it or pop your head out of cover. So that's really an LMG, at least for now, though that's likely to change. I'll bring up this point because, like I said, games are meant to be educational, so if you're doing something like 2042 or a later year, then you could totally do like a simulation of what the future of the military could be, because it's always evolving. So, anyways, the U.S. Marine Corps did an experiment with the M27 IAR, which is short for Infantry Automatic Rifle. The experiment that they were attempting to accomplish with the M27 was to see if equipping a full squad with an M27 using a drum magazine, which was 60 rounds at the time, and I'm not sure if that's changed, but a polymer drum magazine with 60 rounds, to see if maybe it would just give better combat effectiveness. And there's a whole study on this that's declassified. If you want to read it, there's an entire freaking PDF that's declassified on all of this. But the gist of it is that it had some obvious cons and pros. So really is just dependent on the situation. But yeah, so there's that. Special forces also varies by country to country. So I'll go ahead and bring that up because really infantry squadrons in general are pretty straightforward. They usually use an AR that's really flexible and capable of responding to a wide variety of situations. But yeah, so I'll go and skip over riflemen and just go ahead and talk about special forces. So special forces. Some examples include Poland Special Forces, and I can't think of their name right now. I think that would probably be a good one to point out. Let me think. What's some other good ones to point out? Oh, Unit 234, which is Israel. Yeah, I'll go and use those as examples because they're going to be some really oddball examples. Not just because you probably haven't heard of them or read about them, but also probably because they're a little more unique than some of the other units you're used to hearing when you hear Special Forces. So let me talk about Poland Special Forces first. So what's really interesting about Poland Special Forces is that they always run in small units. And they are very good at what they do, because if you do any Googling into Poland Special Forces, and I'll even link you the wiki page, they have gained such world renown that they were involved with or helped to train some of the biggest names you've heard out there. Like that famous sniper, Kyle. They were involved with him, and many other names. So yes, they're very small units, but they're extremely good at what they do. And so because they're a small unit, they have to change their tactics in accordance to whatever mission they have. So generally speaking, that they will go in with ARs, but they are trained marksmen and snipers within their special forces unit. So they are able to respond to a wide variety of situations. Yeah, and so just I'll leave it all for you to read, but that's kind of Poland Special Forces, Unit 234. So Israel's had a long history of being self-sufficient, I guess is the wording I'm looking for, meaning that they've spent many years being in the middle of hostile neighbors. They've dealt with their hostile neighbors for who knows how long. It's just been a unfortunate back and forth thing for Israel. They've just had to deal with so much on their own. And sure, there are countries out there that do support them, but unfortunately, sometimes that support is not enough. They have to handle a lot of things on their own. So there's a couple of things that have resulted from this long history of back and forth with Israel. One is going to be that they are extremely good at being creative. Because if you look at anything like the Merkava tank or any one of the other examples I could pull up, they have had to deal with nations not wanting to sell them their technology. When the Merkava tank was created, Israel did reach out to the United Kingdom to see if they could get a hold of their Chobham armor technology, and obviously they were denied that technology. So the Merkava was created using just basically whatever they had available to them. So the Merkava was literally created without Chobham armor or any of the other major technologies that you've heard. As a matter of fact, it's just rolled steel mixed in with a couple other features. So it's really interesting to see the history play out of Israel to a point where they've been unfortunately forced to do things like that, where they've learned to just be creative and try to get around their problems. But either way, so yeah, Unit 234 is really just one of many examples of Israel's units being adaptive and trying to work around their situation. So what makes Unit 234 interesting for a Special Forces unit is because they are, well, they're labeled as an intelligence unit, but they are more than capable of fighting behind enemy lines. So they're not a frontline unit. They're actually a unit intended to find intelligence and deal with any threats in the process of getting that intelligence. So it's going to be a much different scenario than Poland's special forces, which is going to be more geared towards a wide variety of tasks. But either way, I'm bringing this up to point out that special forces has a pretty broad term, and it also goes to show that you could put this kind of stuff in the game. I mean, all that information's out there on Wikipedia pages, Google pages, so you can do a lot with games if you know actual military tactics and history. But I'll move on. So that's kind of your overview of your units out there. So I'll go in and deviate into one final example to kind of display this, but that's the vehicle. So what's really interesting is that there are some military units out there that don't have attack helicopters. Most people think, oh, it's an Apache, right? With the United States, a couple other countries, and other countries will likely have this because people buy military armament, and that's not the case. There are actually some countries that do not have attack helicopters. So this is actually another thing you can bring up in terms of being educational with games. But I'll give a quick example. That's going to be Italy. Italy actually doesn't have an attack helicopter anymore. They used to, and it was the Mongoose, I believe was its name. I can double check that, but I'm pretty sure it was the Mongoose. And so what Italy does is they actually use a combination of infantry and vehicles for dealing with situations in the absence of an attack helicopter. If the threat has exceeded their abilities with both vehicles and infantry, then they will resort to air power. So the reason that Italy made this decision, well, at least from what I can read anyways, is because helicopter maintenance and use is expensive, which is true. Honestly, I don't know why the United States hasn't ditched the Apache any sooner, but, it's whatever, I guess. But yeah, so they determined it was just too expensive, and they have ways of dealing with it. One way that they deal with it is a really cool thing that's kind of unique in today's world, because most nations now use main battle tanks, but Italy doesn't actually have just main battle tanks. They also have what's called the Centauro, and it has some other names too, but the Centauro is basically a wheeled fighting vehicle that fires a really large caliber cannon. And so it's unique in the fact that it's not a main battle tank, but it still has a battle tank cannon on it. This provides Italy armored vehicle units with an advantage and, of course, some disadvantages. One of those advantages being that the Centauro is much faster and easier on the fuel than the main battle tanks are. So the Centauros have better range than vehicles or main battle tanks that carry the same size cannon. So yeah, just kind of some examples to throw out there. I want you to see why I was saying all that stuff about being educational. But anyways, I'll go and move on and get back to Battlefield. So that said, I think one of my complaints about Battlefield is the repeated use of Russian weaponry. I understand that Russian weaponry is iconic, but come on. I've been seeing the KA-52, I think it's its name, or its designation. I know it's called the Alligator by nickname, the attack helicopter that's not the MI, or I'm sorry, the HIP. The helicopter that's not the HIP, it's called the Alligator. And it's in the Battlefield game, and I'm just really like, come on with the Russian weaponry. I get it's iconic, but it's so sickening to see it in every game. It's just like, you have to put it in so many other games, and it's just like, can you give us a break? Can you give us something new and refreshing? It drives me up the wall when I see that. So, don't get me wrong. I think the Alligator is an interesting attack helicopter. I just don't agree with it being in the game. It's just, come on, give him, yeah, just, whatever. Right, so as far as the, performance issues. So I have seen not just Archcast, but many other videos where people were really, really struggling to get good performance out of Battlefield 2042. And again, I'm aware that it's possibly a build that's not current, but still, it's disappointing to see that this is a constant with all betas, where they just have that much of a performance issue. In my opinion, the way things should be worded, or the way things should be handled, is if a game is not fully optimized quite yet, then that to me is an alpha, meaning it's not ready for beta. A beta is when the game has been refined and is ready to be stress tested by the general public. That to me is what the definition of a beta is. So I am tired of seeing time and time after again of games that just constantly throw out a beta that is just clearly not ready to be called a beta. So that's just kind of my little gripe with it. But yeah, performance issues are definitely there, and I can only hope that they get corrected by the time full release happens. Let me tab over real quickly so I can talk about the next topic. Okay, I imagine people are probably going to get tired of me talking about this after how many ever recordings I've done it, but I need to do it, and I'll explain why I need to do it in a bit. But first, let me just get this out of my system. So, Battlefield has a lot on the line. Not only is it a return of a iconic game series, but also it's coming out at a very interesting time. It's coming out at a time when Easy Anti-Cheat has open support for Linux gaming. So I kind of see a lot of the being on the line with this, between not only making Battlefield fans satisfied, because a lot of them have been waiting years for a good Battlefield. So not only are you in a position where you have to deal with that, of satisfying them because it's been too long, but also you're in a position to potentially be the first AAA game to be played on Linux since the Easy Anti-Cheat change. That is a lot on the line for a good number of reasons, and I want to now quickly deviate into why I continue to bring this up and why I drive this so hard. To be clear, I'm not a fan of Linux. I do think that it has some rough edges, and those rough edges do need to be worked out. But the one thing I do recognize is that it's important for the gaming ecosystem. Here's why. In recent times, Microsoft purchased Bethesda Studios, which means now that Microsoft is in possession of 23 game studios, including your most iconic games. So, all that stuff like Fallout, Elder Scrolls, they are all now owned by Microsoft. Not only does Microsoft own all this, but they also own Xbox, DirectX, and of course Windows. For most people, you'd be like, oh, this doesn't affect me. Oh, yes, it does. And this is the reason I drive it so hard, because for PC gamers, you need DirectX to play almost all of your games. Unfortunately, that is how important DirectX is. Not only that, a lot of your games are developed in DirectX or another license of Microsoft like Azure Studios. These are all things in the development process of a game that are owned by Microsoft. So let me put it this way to you, just so you understand how scary of a situation this can be in a couple of years. Will it happen? Who knows? But there is the potential for it to happen. So let me throw out this potential situation that could occur. You know how in the console world, like Xbox and PlayStation have their exclusive games? Well, guess what? That can happen because of how many studios and game licenses Microsoft owns. At any time, they could restrict their games to Windows. They could restrict it to Xbox. And you would have a repeat of exclusive titles, not just to PC, but also Xbox, because of the fact that they own the two. So, that's just scenario one. Scenario 2 is complete monopolization. Because people refuse to use and support something other than Windows, then Microsoft has the ability to completely corner the market unless some laws are put into place or unless people actually make a difference right here, right now. And the reason I say that they can do that is because, again, they own the property to do it. They have the money to do it. And they have the greed to do it. That is the three issues you're facing with Microsoft. And they will use all of that to their advantage because, again, they are greedy. They want their cut and they want lots of it. They don't like to share. That's the bottom line. So, to summarize this, Battlefield, if it does allow Linux support in the easy anti-cheat panel, will become the first AAA game to be released since the easy anti-cheat change. It will also mark the first AAA game to come out to Linux with direct support, which will give Microsoft a wake-up call. I can guarantee you that. Because, if more and more people start using Linux for gaming, and if more and more games continue to do stuff like that, eventually the camel's back is going to get broken. So with the summary out of the way, I'll just quickly point out what I've had up on my screen. I've done this multiple times now, but this is Proton DB. The software that allows Linux to game through Steam is called Proton. If you ever want to look at statistics or just look at user reports to see how well a game is performed, pull a Proton DB. You will get all of your information there. It's that easy to figure out how well Linux gaming is doing. At least to a certain degree, because obviously there are other software besides Proton that helps Linux game, but it's the easiest one to use, so I'll point out. But yeah, that's really all I have to say about Battlefield. Thanks for listening.